Are we doing this now?
Okay.
Oh yeah, sorry. Let's start the class. Sorry, I forgot.
I just want to set the expectations with everyone. From next class onwards, the invocation practice that we will do will be the actual invocation as well. So we don't do it, twice over to save time. Okay. So we'll request everyone to just join the class, at the right time. Could join in a couple of minutes earlier so that we can start on time and we can do the invocation shlokas as a part of our practice and sadhana. Right? For today's class, we will do it end of the class. So we'll stop at 11:40 and then we will take 20 minutes to just do the practice of the shlokas. Okay. All right. So we closed last time on shloka 6. for chapter 6, Shloka 6, chapter 6, right? Now, we heard Bhagwanji tell us in the last class how we ourselves are our best friend and our own worst enemy, right? There is no other friend or foe that we have. So either we can help ourselves or we can hinder ourselves. Holding anyone else responsible, sorry, holding anyone else responsible for anything in our lives, for anything that we experience in our lives, is basically a great misconception, nothing else but a misconception. So how do we help ourselves, and or how do we hinder ourselves? We help ourselves when we are able to elevate ourselves beyond the basic animality. So what are those animality features that have been talked about, right? This is stuff that everyone else, all other animals, the entire animal kingdom indulges in, which is eating, sleeping, reproduction, and fear. If we give in to these activities, if all that we do in our entire life is just follow these four things, which is most of us, we do that in an unconscious manner, then we are basically hindering ourselves. We are our own worst enemies. Everything that is happening in our life, whatever is outside of us, is a reflection of what is inside of us. And if we are not focusing on elevating ourselves beyond these four aspects, which are basically related to our body consciousness, then that means that we are actually our worst enemies. And we are creating things that we see outside, which are not, things that we are not necessarily happy about. But when we work, it is not just something that we need to do to help ourselves. It is our bounden duty. It is the only duty of the man. Because human yoni is the only place where we can elevate ourselves beyond these. In every other yoni that we will have, in every other birth, that choice is not available to us. This choice is only available to us in this one life when we are born as human beings. So it is our duty to elevate ourselves. And how do we do that? By conquering our mind and our senses, by having a complete control over our body, our mind, our senses. So how do we do that? How do we conquer over these? We've learned that before. It is through a faculty that is available to us, which is intellect. Intellect helps us rise above our basic nature, right? It helps us rise above our tendencies of the mind. So what does mind do? Mind ka basic nature is to follow likes and dislikes. That's all that it does. I like this, I don't like this. Whatever I like, I want to have more of that. Whatever I don't like, I want to avoid it. And our entire life becomes based on that. How to avoid what I don't like, how to get what I like, more of what I like. We have to use our intellect to rise above this. So how would you know that someone or ourselves have actually conquered, that we have risen above this whole thing? It is reflected very easily in one thing. How equanimous are we in our external circumstances? What is our, how we hold ourselves when the various types of the dualities present themselves? So whether these are of physical nature, heat, cold, when we experience any kind of physical experience outside of us, how equanimous we can stay within that. That is one. Then there are mental and emotional triggers or experiences that we have. How equanimous we can stay within that. The happiness, the unhappiness, the honor, the dishonor. This will tell us very clearly how far we are along in our sadhana. Okay? So with that, summary of what we did primarily in our last class, we'll move on to Shlok 7. Rashi, will you read the connection for us, please? Connection after Shloka 6.
Okay. The Lord knew, right?
Yes, the Lord now enumerates. Yes.
Yeah. The Lord now enumerates the characteristics of a person whose mind, senses, and body are under control. This would obviously help in ascertaining the extent of success in the effort for self-evaluation. The Lord says,
Jitatmana prashantasya
Jitatmana prashantasya
Paramatma samahitaha
Paramatma samahitaha
Shitoshna sukha dukkheshu
Shitoshna sukha dukkheshu
Tatha manapamanayoho.
Tatha manapamanayoho.
Very nice. Jitatmanaha is one who has won over his body, mind, and senses. Prashantasya is one whose internal tendencies are shant. That means he has acquired inner calmness. Paramatma is Paramatma. Samahitaha samyak prakar se sthit hai. One whose knowledge has nothing but Lord. One who has situated himself in the Lord. Shitoshna is Sheet and Ushna, cold and heat. Sheet is cold, Ushna is heat. Sukha dukkheshu is happiness and unhappiness. Man and apman, honor and dishonor.
The Supreme Self becomes manifest in one who has control over one's mind, senses, and body, and who is perfectly tranquil. Such as one is marked out by one's equipoise in cold and heat, happiness and unhappiness, as also in honor and dishonor. Characteristics, right? Characteristics of one whose mind in fully
So
restrained.
before we read that, so it's to touch upon what Tuvina said, right? Why is equanimity important? I think the best analogy to understand that is, imagine your mind are the ripples of an ocean, in a lake or in a water. Now, we all know we all have a soul. That's what powers our entire being. But as long as there are waves, we can never see the bottom, right? Waves necessarily result in lack of visibility. Waves necessarily result in silt coming up from the ground, so the water becomes muckier. But as soon as the waves calm down, the water calms down, and you're able to reflect the beauty of the ocean, right? You're able to see through the water to see the fishes, the ground, everything else that is hidden there. And that's the same thing for us with our minds. As long as our minds are constantly active and they're constantly engaged in sansar, we will never get a glimpse of the beauty within us. We will never get a glimpse of our own true nature. So in this shloka, he's basically re-emphasizes in the very first line, the Supreme Self, which is the capital S Self, the soul inside of us, manifests or becomes manifest. It's not as if it's not there. It is there. But it becomes manifest to that person who calms those waves down. And that is our prime focus. And as we start working, we've talked about this earlier, Antakaran ki Shuddhi, as we start cleaning our subtle body, we'll start getting those glimpses. Right? Please continue.
Characteristics of one whose mind is fully restrained. Equipoise in opposite stimuli. Here, cold and heat are symbolic of stimuli received from outside. The happiness and unhappiness are symbol of internal stimuli. Equipoising on experiencing these stimuli can be judged easily. Step to meet the situation created by such stimuli can always be taken without any disturbance to mental equipoise.
So here this is an extension of what we read in chapter 2, right? In chapter 2, very clearly this was the first definition of yoga was given to us in chapter 2, where it was said, Samatvam Yog Uchyate. Samta hi yog hai. equanimity is being in yoga. You cannot remain in equanimity unless you are connected, unless there is that union. Union with who? Union with the capital S self. Union of the individualized self with the universal self, right? So when that when there is no, when there is no me and the other, when it is me and me, is when the union happens. And this is marked out by equanimity, right? So, and how does, and then we had also read in chapter 2, to extend what Abhinav said, why remain in equanimity, right? We had read samatvam yog uchyate, and after that, when you are in yoga, all actions become perfect. All actions become efficient when we are in yoga. And this is what is being talked about in the last line of this para. Steps to meet a situation created by such stimuli can be taken without any disturbance to mental equipoise. Which means that we are not talking of not taking steps. Equanimity does not mean everything is okay, I will not take any step. Let's sit down and chill out, right? We have to take the steps that are necessary in a certain situation. It's just that the ability to take those steps in the most efficient manner becomes possible when we are in equanimity. Imagine you are in a corporate and there is some kind of disaster has happened within the company, which requires public relations engagement. If you are in a state of panic, your behavior from your company is going to show in that conversation. Okay, if you are in equanimity, your ability to think things through on what is the most effective and efficient channel of communication, how should we communicate, what should we communicate, what language should be used, will be way more effective than if you were in panic. That is why when you are in equanimity, when you are in equipoise, your ability to see things in holistic manner and be able to respond is going to be extremely efficient. Yes, Kakoli.
Does this also mean the stage when you start understanding that he is no different from you? It is he who resides in you. So is it like a stage when you reach and understand that it is you are he only and he is you? It is the two merged together. Is that that final understanding uh, when whatever we are speaking about, a supremeless self manifesting, that happens when our thought reaches that kind of a stage, when we don't see God as separate from us?
Absolutely. When you can recognize that you are built in his own image and you can experience it, it is not a faith, it is not a belief, it is knowing. Knowing comes, it's like belief or faith is when somebody tells you about what an apple looks like or it tastes like. You believe there is a fruit like apple that exists out there, but you've never seen it. I can tell you an apple is roundish, it is sweet, it is crunchy, it is juicy, it is red and greenish in color. But you can imagine all of those things. But you really wouldn't know it until you actually eat it. When you eat an apple for the first time is when you ultimately know what an apple really is. And when you know what an apple is, then there is no unknowing it any longer. Similarly, manifestation of Lord is when you actually know that you are actually him. He is no different from you. Similarly, knowing that he is in everything that you see, in every VVGP. When you know that the other person, that trees are literally you, you don't exist in an isolation. We have now actually in our life, we've created extremely strong boundaries of individualism. When we create such strong boundaries of individualism, we are living in a complete misconception. We think I exist because I am. No, I don't. I exist because of the entire structure around me. One pillar of the structure falls through and I will stop to exist. I breathe. I breathe oxygen that is given by the trees. Half of my lungs are actually situated out there. My breathing apparatus is actually 50% of it is outside of me. It hangs in the trees. If there are no trees, I cannot breathe any longer. I will cease to exist. When you start looking at your life in that microcosm, you can start to see that how you cannot exist in isolation. You are existing because of everything around you, and you can experience Lord in everything. Is when you'll be able to say that He manifests inside of me and He manifests outside of me. It's only the quality that is different. Sorry, the quality is exactly the same. It is only the quantity that is different. So you can understand this in a much better manner when you think of a drop of water, right? A drop of water taken from an ocean is exactly the same as the rest of the ocean, right? The quality is exactly the same. You put entire ocean under a microscope, or you put one drop under the microscope, you will know that they are exactly the same. It's only the quantity that is different. Similarly, the self inside of us and the supreme consciousness, the quality is exactly the same. It's only the quantity that is different. And so what is inside of us is outside of us. So whatever Lord can do, we can do too. If we can exhibit the same level of equanimity, the same level of control over our body, senses, and intellect as He does. That is the power, the potential that is in our hands. It's just that we don't know how to tap into it. We don't utilize it because we don't have the discipline to do so. And Gita is teaching us that discipline. That makes sense?
So just to add here as well, right? Why is one other reason why equipoise is important is because if it doesn't exist and you're not conscious about it, then your mind is so strong and so loud that you will necessarily chase the stimuli. Which is why this is a habit you have to consciously work upon. If you do not consciously work on your equanimity, if you do not consciously become aware, I am experiencing the stimuli, but not choosing to react from it, if you do not consciously work on it, then you're necessarily responding to it and you're necessarily chasing it. There is no other choice because our mind is so loud and the stimuli is that strong. Right? Which is why equanimity is something we talk about a lot in Gita, because it's the first and most important step for us to rise above stimuli and experience the self within.
I think a very graphical example that has been constantly given in Kumar's class, in our own facilitators class, is Kumar always talks about this, think about a river flowing. If you are in that flow of the river, you are necessarily going to flow with it. You will be taken away by a very strong current in the river. Unless and until you are holding on to something that is held in the ground, right? So when people go in to take a dip in Ganges, they don't just go in because the wave is too strong. They are going to get taken away by the water. What people typically do is there is a pillar that is stuck in the ground. It is kutastha. It does not move. And then there is a chain, an iron chain that is attached to it. People hold on to that chain, or they hold on to the other person who's holding on to the chain to get inside the Ganges. Think of that as holding on to it is then meaning that you are holding on to the Lord, or the holding on to the principles, something that is unwavering and unchanging, irrespective of the VVGP outside. It doesn't matter what changes outside of us. This is unchanging and constant. When we hold on to it, it helps us remain in equanimity. I'm not changing my position again and again. I stay in position because I'm holding on to something kutastha, something that is unwavering, something that is unchanging.
And just to add to that, right, there are 5 things that make us an animal. There's only one that makes us a human. The 5 senses that are there being stimulated, that is what we share with all the animals in the world. There's only one thing that makes us human. And that intellect is what we need to work on by saying, hey, I want to rise above the animality. Anybody can chase stimuli, but Can we raise the humanity within us to not do so?
Shall I?
Yeah, please.
Equanimity in honor of dishonor. This is a somewhat difficult task, but close scrutiny would reveal that honor and acclaim come on the manifestation of some good qualities. Sometimes wealth, status, and eminence also bring honor and acclaim, but generally such an honor or acclaim is accorded by those who have a selfish motive and expectation of some sordid gain. To be delighted by these would therefore be quite vain for those who give honor and acclaim for serving their selfish and pay only lip service and lose no time in casting dishonor or turning abusive if their expectations are not fulfilled. Genuine expression of honor and acclaim should be acknowledged with gratitude. Any expression of criticism can be characterized by misunderstanding, and if it is sincere, it would afford an opportunity for self-correction. One who is though equipoised can march speed, speedily towards the goal of self-realization.
So this is very interesting. In the pandemic, no, at least a lot of people, I'm sure all of us have read posts from our friends on Facebook and otherwise. Everyone said that, oh, the pandemic in a way was such a good reset. Travel did not happen, and I really enjoyed travel. My work took a completely different shape, and I realized my identity is not my work. I need less things to enjoy. I couldn't go shop. I couldn't do my usual old habits of like going out for dinners on Saturdays and Sundays, going out shopping. And the entire theme of the post then eventually leads to that I actually need very little to be happy and to find a little bit of peace, right? And that is true for all of us, right? Like we know happiness doesn't come from these things, but so much of our life we tend to make muddy in the garb of looking good or maintaining honor, maintaining position, and feeding the ego. We make our own lives so complicated, not realizing in reality we need very little to actually be at peace. Of course, you're welcome to have ambition, you're welcome to have purpose, but as long as you're doing things with purpose, not because you're doing it because you'll get fame or success or anything else that comes with it. That is a byproduct. It's what you do with acquiring that object that defines you.
So we'll have Vijay, would you read with us next? Connection.
Extolling the qualities of such person, Lord continues to describe the characteristics of such self-restrained person.
Jnana Vijnana Triptatma.
Jnana Vijnana Triptatma.
Kutastho Vijitendriyaha.
Kutasto Vijatendriyaha.
Yukta ityuchayate yogi.
Yukta Ichutya Ye Yogi.
Samloshtashma Kanchanaha.
Samloshtashma Kanchanaha.
Gyan Vigyan Triptatma is one who is saturated with true and direct perception of Supreme Being. Kutastha is unmoved, unshakable. Vijitendriyaha, one who has his senses under control. Yukt is one who is connected to the Lord. Iti uchyate is said to be. Yogi is the yogi. Samloshtashma kanchana. Sam is equal. Loshtashma kanchana. Losht is clod of earth. Okay. And then Ashma is the stone and Kanchan is gold. So one who looks at earth, stone, and gold as being the same.
Can I?
Yes, please.
Saturated with true perception of the Supreme Being and being fully self-realized, unmoved by perplexities of life, with senses under strict control, and viewing the clod of earth, stone, gold as alike. A yogi said to be united with the Supreme Self.
So here, before we read the larger explanation, right? There are two, so knowledge as we understand it and knowledge as we have interacted with has always been object of knowledge. Knowledge exists somewhere in a book outside of us. It's outside. You go, you read, you learn, you understand, and you bring that knowledge inside. That's how we've always understood knowledge. Knowledge needs to be acquired from outside and made inside, right? So, and this is true for a lot of what we do to develop our skills, to be effective in the world, right? In this shloka, Bhagwanji is saying, in the characteristics of a yogi, this knowledge is not outside. The knowledge of the Gita and our soul is not outside. It is already inside. We just cannot see it because of the muddy water. But the reason why we come every Sunday for this class, the reason we pick up the book every now and then, every day as part of our reading, is because when we start reading, we get glimpses of our own true nature. It speaks to a very deep portion of who we are. And it reminds us of our true nature. Because that knowledge exists within of us. And you can almost imagine, right? Reading the Gita is like cleaning that mirror. Till you don't clean the mirror, you don't see yourself. But does that mean you don't exist? No, you exist. But you can't see it because the mirror is dirty. But the effort of cleaning the mirror, and these are not dirt that has been accumulated in the 40 or 50 years we are here. This is dirt that's been accumulated over lifetimes, numerous hundreds and thousands of lifetimes. So it's jam gaya hai. It's become very tough, right? So in the first part of this shloka, it's saying that knowledge is don't look for it outside. True knowledge of a yogi is a person that finds the knowledge inside. And that knowledge comes from cleaning that mirror. Yeah. Spiritual knowledge is always to be looked at the inside.
Not just spiritual knowledge. So I'll extend that further. And also, this is something that we realize at the end of, in the last chapter, 18th chapter, Arjun actually tells Bhagwanji, doesn't say that, oh, I have now acquired this knowledge. He says, thank you. Now I remember. He has now remembered this knowledge that has always existed inside of him. So we have to, like he said, we have to go inwards. Now I'll take a step forward beyond this. Everything, we always say this word, right? We always say the sentence again and again. What is outside of us is inside of us. What is inside of us is outside of us. So for us to learn anything about outside, not just spiritual knowledge, literally physical knowledge, for you to understand what's out there, you have to understand yourself first. Understanding this body will give you all the understanding that you need to understand the physics outside, the physical world outside, the physical laws that govern this cosmos can be learned because they are all being exhibited inside of our body in various forms. I think at some point of time when we discuss this deeper detail, I will give examples for you to be able to visualize this. But without digressing too much, just going back to this particular shloka, there are two words that are used here, Gyan and Vigyan. The next chapter is going to be all about that. We will cover an entire chapter where we will understand what is Gyan and what is Vigyan. But in a sentence, as we progress through this, Gyan is basically, think of Gyan as theory and Vigyan as practical. So in every scientific world, we go through this, right? We do theory, then we go into the lab to do practicals. That is exactly what is here. Gyan is your theory. So acquire the theory, acquire the knowledge, and then practically apply it in the laboratory of life. Vigyan is that. So Gyan is knowing what? Gyan is that everything is Lord. And Vigyan is actually practically applying it and seeing it. Actually seeing that the Lord inside of me is in Abhinav, is in Kavita, is in Kakoli, is in Vijay, right? Being able to actually demonstrate that Gyan in practical day-to-day experience is Vigyan. And in next chapter, we will go through hundreds and hundreds of examples to say, how do I now recognize Lord around me? In what formats do I recognize him? Who is he? How is he manifesting himself in everything around me? That will help us connect. So that is Gyan and Vigyan.
You know, the other thing that's crossing my mind right now, right? Like in different religions, this is expressed slightly differently. Like if you follow the path, you reach heaven, or you become enlightened. In the Gita, it's always the word that is always used is, oh, this person has become self-realized. It is self-realization. And if you break that word, that necessarily connotes that it's not knowledge outside. It's realizing who we really are. That's all that we need to do on our journey, is not to look outside, but look inside. And then when you start doing it, we will realize who we really are. We are Bhagwan, and heaven is inside of us. It's that state of mind where everything becomes a joy. Yeah.
Just to remind ourselves and just to set context, we're doing Dhyan Yoga, the chapter Dhyan Yoga, and the first 10 shlokas here, we're trying to understand what is called the Bahiranga Sadhana, where we are trying to understand what outside of this, like previously, what do we need to have in place to be able to do a successful Dhyan Yoga, to be in yoga through Dhyan, what needs to be in place, which is everything that we are doing, right? Karma Yoga, being able to have that full control. And when that full control happens, you are able to have you're able to have a equanimous mind. You will see when we come to actually Dhyan Yoga, why every single thing that we have read is so essential, so important. It's a bedrock. Unless we do this stuff, we cannot get to Dhyan Yoga. We'll come to all of that. And then we'll start to understand why and how we treat this body, why we have to treat it with so much reverence. Why is there so much of conversation around proper eating, proper food, indulgence? Why is that to be restricted, right? So let's move on.
The characteristics of a yogi. Some important words have been used in this sloka. Their correct connotation has to be understood. True perception of supreme being, jnana. It is quite distinct from ordinary knowledge, which connotates only a methodical perception of sense objects. As the intellect look inward and contemplates, it comes to have a perception of subtle entities. As it advances further, it realizes the existence of Supreme Being whose omnipotence governs the universe. This ultimate perception is called Jnana. Total perception or full realization, Vijnana. This term is usually taken to denote the knowledge of objects, structural analysis of their properties, actions, and reactions. Such a knowledge would aptly be called objective knowledge, but the real connotation of this word would be full realization of how the supreme power, which is subtler than the subtlest, operates and manifests itself in multiplicity of phenomenal creation. This realization is called Vinyan, the immovable.
So on Vijnana, right? Just a couple of things. The one is the full realization of the knowledge is what Kakuli was talking about earlier as well, right? And you can see this is all so deeply connected. But when you have the full realization of the knowledge, you don't just see Kakuli as a person. You see Kakuli as divinity, because it's that same subtle energy that powers everything. And as Tuina was saying earlier, it powers the entire world, from trees to wind to sun. Everything is powered by that same energy, same subtle energy. And we've discussed this earlier, right? Subtle is always more powerful than gross. You can have a car which is 1,000 kgs with the greatest amount of technology, but without a spark, nothing will move. It's the subtle that moves the gross, right? We tend to do the opposite. We tend to go after the gross because it's more stimulative, it's more attractive, it's bigger, it's stronger. Not realizing it's the subtle behind all of us is what we should be looking for. And Vigyan is having the full realization of this knowledge, where you can see and you can experience the subtlety around us.
It's like we say, no, mano fir jano. So mano is acquiring that knowledge, and then jano is when you actually experience it, when you start to put it in practical use, and then you learn from that experiential knowledge. And that is what is very important. We all have to put all of this. There's no point in just reading and listening, right? We all are trying to implement it. Once we implement it and see it work in our daily lives, that experiential knowledge will only become deeper and deeper and deeper. Has to be experienced, has to be. That's why we have to apply all of these principles in our daily life. We'll fail again and again. And then at least once we've applied and we've figured out why it has failed, then we know, oh, what did we do wrong? And then we can go back with greater zeal and apply it again. So Vigyan is very important in Gita. So whenever, if somebody says it's all spiritual, there is no practicality to it, there is no, people can't replicate it, so it is not scientific, there's nothing further from the truth. It's a very scientific process. And they, in fact, in Gita, all through, there is a big emphasis on practical work, on practical implementation of this, on developing experiential knowledge. So once we apply it, you will see every single person who's actually done the experiment properly has come to the same set of results. It does not lead to any different result. What we need is discipline for conducting the experiment in the first place. People fail when they do not do the experiment properly. Right? It's the same as in chemistry. We go and do an experiment. It has certain conditions which must be fulfilled properly for an experiment to come through. So we need to always focus on what are we doing wrong in our experiment if the results are not as per what has been dictated.
Okay. The other reflection that I had on this was, and I don't know if it's fully apt, but I'm going to share it nonetheless, is if we look at our own lives, right, and our own bodies, at least I've thought very every now and then that where it's so easy to lose life, right? Like we have so many different organs, so many different things. Like we have a small son, right? The number of times he's fallen, and I'm just like 1 inch this, 1 inch this way, and boss, his life could have changed, right? Like there are so many near misses, and we're living on a planet also where if the temperature of the planet increases a few degrees, all life will cease to exist. If the sun becomes a little bit hotter, our life would cease to exist. Everything would catch fire, right? It's almost like the perfect cauldron. But what I'm trying to highlight is there is a subtle energy that actually holds all of this together in almost perfect union.
In a balance. The
In
word
a
is balance.
balance.
And that balance will actually it's a great word you've used, Abhinav, because this is what we are going to talk about, few shlokas down the line if we get there. It's all about balance and how balance is super important in Dhyan Yoga. Yeah. Let's move on.
The immovable, kutashta. In smithing, the metal is hammered into required shape on the anvil. Even under constant hammering, the anvil remains fixed and immovable. This is the idea taken to apply to the mental condition of the perfectly equipoised yogi who remains absolutely unmoved while facing the trials and tribulations of life. This immovability is called Kutashta quality. Describing the above qualities, the
So,
large, yeah, sorry.
So just really quickly. So the IPL auction happened, right? Couple of 10 days ago, couple of weeks ago. Um, and if you watched the auction or even parts of the auction, you noticed every table had a team of 5, 6 people, and this was bidding of players, right? And there's a lot of game theory happening. There is a lot of like people are like raising the prices of certain players ताकि दूसरों का they have to spend more money on a player, and then they have less money for the next player to buy, right? It's all game theory. It's like bidding and auctioning. What was interesting though is every single table, before they lifted their thing to make a bid, they were all on the phone with earpieces talking to someone who was not in the room. And do you know why that was? Or it actually makes a lot of sense, is because that person not in the room is away from the stimulation and senses and emotions of the room. So he's the director, not the actor. So he's able to see things with a bigger picture, right? Similarly, like there is another client of mine, right? And with him we work on Indian Railway projects. And whenever there is an important meeting, what he does is he sends his number 2 team to that meeting, and he does nothing but sit in a room quietly waiting for phone calls and updates. And he said, when they call and give me an update, my job is to direct them. That's it. And these are just examples for us also to realize we have to move from being the actor who's constantly stimulated and reacting and giving gross performances to being the director controlling that actor, so that the actor then plays the play with the right purpose. The director can tell the actor, hey, maybe say the line this way, maybe express the emotion this way, it will be more effective, it will be more evocative, right? And that's what this shloka is saying, that when you have become that knowledge, you evoke that director in a way that you're experiencing, you're playing the game as the actor, but you're constantly in the director's chair.
Let's go ahead.
Describing the above qualities, the Lord says that man who exercises strict control on his senses and the mind remains absorbed in contemplation of the perception of Supreme Being. He remains unmoved by dualities of life, like happiness and unhappiness, honor and dishonor, and the like. His views about different material objects like cloud of earth, stone, and gold are not influenced by their exchange value, but their respective utility only. A person who has attained such an ultimate consumption is called a yogi.
Just to be clear, I heard myself.
We can hear you.
Yeah, Vijay, can you mute yourself? I think I'm hearing myself. Thank you. Just to be just to be clear, when he says that the clod of earth, stone, and gold are considered in the same way, they are viewed equally. That does not mean that you treat them the same way, right? Bhav mein samta, vyavahar mein bhinnata. Very important, right? Vyavahar mein bhinnata meaning, like, you are not going to, this does not mean that you take a clod of earth and put it in your treasury box and then you take your gold and put it outside in the shoe box, right? Does not mean that. But we will treat everything with the same respect and love because of the utility they bring into our lives. A shoe protects my feet and must be treated with the same love and care as I would treat something that is of much more, which is much more expensive, because they both bring utility in my life. You will treat a person who is working in your home, cleaning your home, with the same love and respect as you would treat your boss, because they both bring in, but the way the actual treatment is going to be slightly different. Right? So when you say I love everyone, the love you express for your partner will be different from the way you express your love for your child versus the way you'll express your love for your parents versus how you'll express it for your friends. But at the heart, you have the same love and care for everyone, expressed differently. Okay, so this is important to remember. Bhav mein samta, but vyavahar mein bhinnata.
How to translate that?
At the feeling should be the same. The way you think about everyone and everything should be the same, because you're treating them all as divinity, right? So your bhav will be the same, but the way you will actually, your actions will be differently expressed. The same feeling or the same bhav is expressed differently, but at the purpose and the bhav level, they should be all the same.
So what we're reading right now is at the very gross level of mud and gold, right? And it's highlighting, as Tuvina is saying, that you treat them differently, but you view them the same, right? You have the same bhav of reverence towards it. If you actually take it to a subtle level, our own family relationships, we cannot maintain that bhav. And there are people we love, or people we are forever indebted to for life, our own parents for that matter, or we're forever grateful for the joy for our own kids. But we can't maintain that bhav even with them. If they behave a certain way, you're like, aisa kaisa kar liya? You've become very irritable these days. We're so quick to move away from our own divinity because of their behavior. And I'm saying so what I'm trying to highlight is some of these examples are gross, but if you start going subtler and subtler and subtler, you'll realize there is a role for us to play in almost every aspect of our life. And what we always say is, Antakaran ki shuddhi, focus on your bhav with every action. Because the world is it's the other example, right? If जब आप temple जाते हो, when you go to a temple, you go with so much reverence. You fold your hands, you wash your hands, you take a bath, you go there, even if you're placing a flower, you place it gently. There's so much of peace and reverence in every action. Now, what Gita is saying, actually, Bhagwan Ji is everywhere. You're interacting with him 24/7. Everything that's happening is part of his creation. So bring that bhav, that reverence in everything, because is everywhere. That universal energy is the same. So
Yeah.
do we have time for one more, you think? The next one is...
Yeah, we can read through this. This is theory, right? We've gone through this before. I think I wanted to do at least 9 and 10 also. So next week we can start.
The 10th won't happen. Okay. Smita, would you like to read this?
Sure. The above characteristics show the mental qualities of a yogi. Now the Lord describes the characteristics of his attitude towards other persons.
Suhrin mitraryudasina.
Suharin mitrayudarsina.
Madhyastha dvesha bandhushu.
Madhyastya dvesha bandhushu.
Sadhushvapi cha papeshu.
Sadhushvapi cha papeshu.
Sambuddhir vishishyate.
Sambuddhir vishishyate.
Suhrin is benefactor. Suhrit is benefactor. Mitra is friend. Ari is foe. Udasin is one who is indifferent, even-minded in everything that happens. Madhya is mediator. Madhyasth, mediator. Dvesh is adversary. Bandhushu is kinsman. Sadhu is saint, and papeshu refers to sinner. Sambuddhir vishishyate is one who treats them all the same.
A person who has an even-minded attitude towards the various classes of persons like a benefactor, a friend, a foe, a stranger, a mediator, an adversary, a kinsman, and even a saint or a sinner is undoubtedly superb. The component of...
So this is already taking us subtler, right? From gold and mud, we're now going to subtler, which is different types of people that we interact with. And then the subtlest would be what I said earlier, which is the same person who behaves with you differently. And I just want to highlight here, even-minded attitude does not mean aloof. It does not mean non-involvement. It means choosing the bhav with which you want to interact, choosing the intent and emotion with which you want to interact. And that bhav should always be that of reverence, compassion, love. Because if they're behaving a certain way, which is could be they're upset or they're irritable or they're angry, they share exactly the same things that we also do. And our because we read the Gita, our job is to elevate that empathy. So, and build that relatability by having the right bhav towards that.
Relating it back to the previous shloka, this, what we are reading here, is Gyan. This is Gyan, knowledge. This is how it should be. In the next chapter, we will understand the Vigyan. How do I actually do this? I understand that this needs to be done at a knowledge level. Now, how do I actually do it? How do I connect to a foe or an adversary in the same way as I connect to my friend? So we'll go through that Vigyan in the next chapter. Yeah. Let's go ahead and read, please.
The comportment of a yogi. In the first line of the shloka, 7 different types of relations of a person with others are enumerated. Suhrid, or a benefactor. Such a person by nature works for the benefit of others without being asked and without any expectation of return. Mitra, or friend. Such a man bases his relations with another on the principle of reciprocity. While a benefactor works for the benefit of another without any expectation, a friend's attitude is based on mutual and reciprocal considerations. Ari, or a foe. Such a person harbors a feeling of enmity for another with some reason, real or imagined, and does not flinch from causing harm behind one's back. Udasana, or one who is indifferent. Such a person has no connection with and has no sentiment for another and is thus totally indifferent. Madhyastha, or mediator. Such a man has a completely impartial attitude towards impartial attitude between conflicting interests, and he works for the benefit of both parties. Dveshya, or adversary. Such a person is openly hateful and find fault in another even without reason. Bandhu, or kinsman. Such a person is usually bound to another through family relationship. In the second line, two general categories of persons are mentioned: saints and sinners. Saints are persons who are always engrossed in working for the good of all, whereas sinners, by their nature, occupy themselves with inflicting harms on others. In this shlok, the Lord points out that the man who succeeds in keeping strict control over his senses, mind and body does not allow his personal predilections to interfere with his sense of duty towards persons mentioned in the first line or in the second line of the shlok.
So, a couple of things which crossed my mind here. One is that why are we born? Why have we come back in human form? We've come back in human form because we have debts to pay. We have to face the consequences of our previous actions, right? We have karma that we need to experience in this life. Even for a yogi, and this highlights the 7 different type of people, that there is a lot of diversity everywhere with a different type of people that we interact with. And the reason for that is so that it triggers the experiences we need to have to get rid of our own karma. So right now we may be in a place where like, oh, we don't really have an enemy. Or we might be in a place, oh yeah, I really don't like that person. I do consider that person my enemy. It doesn't matter who that other person is. And it doesn't matter labeling people. What matters is working on yourself to convert every single person as being part of divinity. That is our journey. Going from choosing he's my friend and he's not my friend to actually being friendly to everyone. Going from saying, oh, I love you, but you're an acquaintance, so I just like you, to being loving to everyone. Right? So this shloka, let's be very clear, it's not to judge other people and the people that come into our lives. It's knowing each one is coming into our lives for me to experience the consequences of my past actions. And I will treat that as a way to clean my antakaran, so nothing with reverence. Everything in this life is either a lesson or a blessing. And if it's a lesson, then that also is a blessing because that's helping us grow. So you treat it with that same reverence. Make sense? Okay. Should we do the invocation now?
Last shloka, please.
एक और श्लोका.
हाँ, 10th. Quickly हो जाएगा, छोटा सा ही. ठीक है. Kakuli, will you read with us?
Yeah. In the 27th and 28th shloka of chapter 5, the practice of dhyana yoga was touched upon in brief. Now the Lord embarks on a fuller discussion of the subject, as it is of great help to anyone pursuing the discipline of karma yoga or jnana yoga or that of the eightfold yoga of psychic control.
Yogi yunjita satatam.
Yogi yunjita satatam.
Atmanam rahasi sthitaha.
Atmanam rahastititaha.
Ekakiyat chittatma.
Ekakiyat chittatma.
Nirashira parigraha.
Nirashira parigraha.
Yogi, we know, yunjit is fixate or concentrate on. Satatam is constantly in Lord or constantly in the Paramatma. Atmanam, Atma ko, and Rahasi is in a secluded place. Sthitah, staying. Ekaki, alone. Yat chittatma is keeping the mind and body in control. Nirashi is free from. Parigraha, one who doesn't hoard. One who doesn't hoard. Parigraha nahi karta. One who does not hoard.
Staying alone in a secluded place, the yogi should try to meditate constantly, keeping the mind and body controlled and free from cravings and greed. The state of mind of an aspirant of dhyana yoga. The word yogi used in this shloka denotes an aspirant for dhyana yoga and not an accomplished yogi. The first requisite for an aspirant is to carefully observe the thoughts arising in the mind.
So
This
here,
shloka,
the last few shlokas we're reading, right? We're reading how stimulated our mind becomes, like Tuna was saying with that analogy of the river. It will constantly flow in that river. It is us who has to choose to step away to start becoming equanimous. And meditation is that very first step. Because the whole purpose of any meditation is just to observe thoughts, not to engage in it. And observing thoughts without engaging is building that skill of equanimity. Right? So the first step of meditation is just to observe thoughts. And I think that's what we will read a little bit more of.
the shloka prescribes a set of 4 guidelines for the aspirant. Number 1, the body, mind, and senses should be kept under strict control. Number 2, no hope should be entertained from anyone in the world. Number 3, the tendency to accumulate things of utility should be given up. Number 4, living alone in a secluded place and in isolation should be preferred. Meditation can be practiced by anyone as an aid to all the other disciplines for self-realization. But for those who are intent to practice the discipline of dhyana yoga by meditation, the above conditions are essential. In fact, by itself, this alone is the sole means for achieving self-realization.
So I think the fourth one should be addressed first because it creates a lot of confusion in the minds of people. Living alone in a secluded place, considering that we are all karmi yogis, how practical is that, right? So this is something that you don't need to do today, right? We are all starting, we are all aspirants, we are not yoga rude as yet, right? So this is something when we intensify our practice, at some point of time, this will become important. And which is where when we start to make this more strong, then we will take time out. In fact, we will need to take time out of our regular humdrum of everyday activity to actually go and do a stronger meditation practice. Examples being, for example, you can go to do vipassana, for example, for 10 days, step away. This is within a certain, like you're going into another institution to help you do it. Eventually, you will get there. But this is not what is expected of all us karma yogis in today's, depending on our ashram of life. When our ashram is grahast ashram, when we are looking after our children, it is not expected of us. But as we progress into the next 2 ashrams of our life, this becomes an important part. Once we have done all our duties, we have to go and do this as a duty to ourselves, where we spend more and more time, because then our ashram itself will support this activity. Okay, so it is not expected to do as of day one, like, oh, we're not expecting all of us leave our jobs and go and sit in a secluded place. So that's important. The first one, body, mind, and senses should be under very strict control. If our body is not under our control and we do not have complete control over it, doing meditation for any length of time is going to be impossible. So imagine you sit down to do dhyan yoga, okay, full enthusiasm. Today, 30 minutes, I'm going to do it, right? You keep a timer next to you. And what is going to be a timer? It's going to be phone for most of us, right? You put it even on a quiet mode. it is going to give a little buzz. As soon as you sit down, I can guarantee you there's going to be a buzz. There's going to be a call. There's going to be a message. 100%. Okay. Within first few minutes. And then what happens? Your first thought in your mind is, oh, I have to go and like, who called? Whatever it is. No. I don't want to go back to this. I have to sit down and do my meditation. You're going to do that, right? And then again, there is going to be a thought, oh, what if it was important? Maybe I should just take a look at it once. Then the other thought, no, I'm meditating. This can wait. I will come back to it after 30 minutes. But you've lost your equanimity there. Okay. So that is why, to that extent, whenever you are doing your meditation, to that extent, for that moment, try and go in a secluded place. Don't sit and meditate in your living room. Don't go sit and do meditation in your kitchen. Try and find a quieter place for those 30 minutes when you're doing meditation. That's one. Second, body needs to be under control, because if you are not feeling well, an afflicted or a diseased body is going to create issues. You cannot sit long enough. And a diseased or an afflicted body is the greatest hindrance to doing any meditation. You're not flexible enough. You sit down to do meditation, your body will start to create pains and aches everywhere. Okay. So that is why having a healthy body is the most important vehicle for us to be able to do proper Dhyan Yoga. That is why it is important to know why we need to eat certain foods. Because there are certain foods that will help us keep this body healthy. It's the same as there's no morality to anything. There's no morality to food. It is plain and simple science. There is a vehicle that has been built with petrol as its fuel. You put diesel into it, it is not going to function as efficiently. If you put, bad type of petrol, which is mixed with pollutants or stuff that does not make it as efficient, that fuel will necessarily translate into poorer performance of that vehicle. It is as scientific as that, right? That is why we need to control food and what times we eat that food, because it will make our body more efficient and it will help us give that vehicle, that platform on which to do the meditation. Our bodies need to be healthy. So not just food, but also exercise. And to do all of this, you imagine you need to have control over your senses, to wake up at a certain time in the morning, to go for your exercise, or to take out time out of your work at a certain time during your day to go for. All of this requires control over our senses. That is why this is the bedrock. That is why first 5 chapters have been devoted to this. That is why Karma Yoga and practice of Karma Yoga is so important before we get to Dhyan Yoga. If we don't do it well, it will create hindrances. But the good news is that Dhyan Yoga, where you don't need to master first 5 chapters to master 6. This is all in, steps towards each other. We do some parts of first 5 chapters, we get to 6th chapter, to whatever extent we do it as a aspirant, it will strengthen the first 5 chapters practice, which will then turn your 6th chapter practice even better. So it's a virtuous cycle. It will bring ourselves up with continuous practice. They self-reinforce each other. Okay. With that, I'll stop. I'm really excited that from next chapter, next shloka, we are going to get get deeper into actual Dhyan Yoga. So that will be a fun one.
Hi, Tumina.
Yes.
Can you please explain the second point? No hope should be entertained from anyone in the world.
Yeah, this is basically no hopes is the word that is the correct word here is expectations. No hopes meaning there should be no expectations from other people to make us happy. There should be no expectations from others that my happiness comes from this person. My or my peace comes from this person doing certain things. We read in the previous shloka, right? We are our own enemies and we are our own foes. So whatever gets created outside of us is because of our own selves and not because of someone else. So we have to basically kill expectations from others. But we should at the same time strive to fulfill other people's expectations of us to the extent we can without moving ourselves out from our own divinity. What does that mean? That also means that if somebody has expectations of me, I will do it to the best of my ability. But that doesn't mean I'll kill myself, right? I have to know when to say yes and when to say no to expectations from others. Right? But not entertain any expectations from others. If somebody actually does what they're supposed to, be very grateful. But if they don't do it, then instead of getting upset with them, we'll find out why somebody has not done what was expected of them. And we can go and talk to them without losing our equipoise, our mental equilibrium. Yeah.
Thank you.
Perfect. So shall we start our invocation shlokas? I'll stop the recording here.